Hey again. It's me.
This isn't ASMR. Why are you whispering?
I'm not whispering. If I speak louder, then everyone's gonna go deaf.
And with that, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Stoppage Time podcast with Declan Price and my good friend
Ivan.
And we're back after a year-long hiatus to talk to you about the wonderful thing that is the World Cup. Do you know the World Cup, Ivan?
You know that speed song? Yeah, I know what the World Cup is, the World Championship.
To see a clear pathway towards a World Cup competition come out of Chicago.
So anyway, we apologise for the long break. For those who maybe have been on the channel before, you'll notice that it's been about a year or so since we've done one of these. Ironically, the last time we did one was right before the Euros. So I suppose the timing's rather consistent. But hardware issues impeded us from continuing with the show as we intended to, and we decided rather than just put out something that we didn't think was very good, or good at all, actually, we would rather wait and come back at a better time. And now we are. Now we've been able to pick up where we left off, hopefully, with new equipment, with a new studio to record in, and new software as well. Ooh, very fancy software. With that, we're here to talk about the World Cup, mate. It's the big World Cup preview. We'll be trying to do one of these once every week or so, although that might be a little bit optimistic. But the minimum target we're aiming for is at least twice a month. I'm hoping to do at least 2 of these a month so we can actually track the World Cup as it progresses in between fixtures and knockout rounds and all the rest of that. But yeah, before we dive into it, how are you feeling, mate? How do you feel about the World Cup in the illustrious and famous footballing nation that is Qatar?
Yeah, it's just an all-round not very good thing. And before, people come in with, Russia did this and shit, we're going to bring some facts to, change everyone's opinions.
I hope you brought the facts, because I have no facts. I have no facts at all.
Everything what we say.
Facts, because I think it's important.
Okay, so with that, how do you feel about people boycotting this thing? Because I've sort of got mixed opinions on it. My sort of view is I don't get the point of boycotting a tournament when it's already happening. I don't get the point of boycotting it if in terms of just not watching it on telly. Because the money's been spent. I feel like that's what people don't understand is the time to boycott the World Cup would have been like 10 years ago when this fucking shit show.
World Cup. You do it last World Cup.
Or the last World Cup, sure. But any time before this sort of circus is off the ground. But to boycott it now, I mean, all the money's been spent, the money's been earned as well by the sponsors and that. FIFA's already raked in everything they're going to get. The stadiums have already been built. The migrants who worked on them have already died. The teams are prepared to travel. At this point, I feel like not watching it is really just punishing yourself. And I don't personally feel like punishing myself. I feel like we've all collectively as a civilization had a pretty rough go of it these last 3 years. I think it's perfectly okay to want to enjoy some football, which is not to justify in any way what's going on in Qatar. Obviously, the human rights abuses are horrible, but I think that's my point. Is as long as you acknowledge why it's wrong and why it's terrible, I think it's perfectly okay for people to be watching the games. Because again, I'm not sure what functional benefit boycotting it will have. I don't see what exactly changes by boycotting it. What, they won't let them host it again? They're not going to let Qatar host it again anyway. They're probably not going to let any Arab nation host it again after the utter fiasco that this has been from a public relations perspective. So it's kind of, I think with the Qatar World Cup, you kind of just got to like clench your ass cheeks a little bit and just, get it over with. I'm not sure there's another way.
Yeah, I just don't. Look, you don't have to boycott it, but I don't appreciate it when people just go, well, it's their country, their rules. You have to respect it. It's their culture. When you go to fucking Spain, you don't fucking you don't have to not hold hands in fucking public and basic human rights shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. I think that culture is obviously a real thing and it's valid, and I'm sure people will argue that part of a World Cup should be exploring a country's culture, but I also think that culture comes with a limit. So that's just my sort of... I did want to touch on it briefly because it would feel disingenuous not to mention the controversy surrounding this tournament. I feel like the controversy is what's going to be remembered for more than the football. But we are here to talk about football. This is meant to be a sort of football podcast. So with that, I do have an interesting statistic that I'd like to bring up, if you don't mind. Do you mind?
I told you we'd bring facts.
This is an interesting little one. I'm not sure it's a good one though. Like a lot of things with this World Cup, I'm not sure it's what people will want to hear. But as I've been doing a little bit of research, as we studiously do at the Stoppage Time podcast headquarters, as I've been doing a little bit of research on the tournament, one thing that I've found that I think is very interesting is the shocking in quotation marks number of teams that have struggled and continue to struggle to score goals consistently. I feel like that's a major recurring theme with teams participating in this World Cup, is a real struggle to score goals across all groups pretty much, from Ecuador to Iran to Wales to Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Tunisia, Spain, Germany, Japan, Croatia even. These are all teams across, like I said, both sort of sides of the tournament bracket who've seriously struggled for goals in the build-up to this tournament. And on the one hand, it makes me happy because one of Croatia's main issues is the lack of sort of a main goal-scoring outlet, and to see that it's a widespread issue does make you think, well, maybe it won't hold us back as much as you would expect. But it does raise the possibility, and I'm not trying to be overly negative here or anything like that, and not that you can be when talking about a tournament like this, but it does make me wonder if we are about to witness a horrifically, outstandingly boring World Cup with not a lot of goals scored, because I'm seeing a lot of teams that are very well defensively organised, very good at retaining the ball, very good at pressing, but not very good at scoring goals, which is not to say they create chances. And that is the thing that gives me hope, and the thing that keeps me interested, is that a lot of these teams do create chances. I mean, Germany and Japan and Spain do create chances. All these three teams underperformed their XG massively in qualifying. So it makes me think that, we could still be in for an interesting tournament. But I do worry about the possibility that we could have a bit of a Euros 2016 situation here, with a lot of nil-nils, a lot of negative, boring football, a lot of extra time, a lot of penalty shootouts, and ultimately, the 2018 World Cup, I believe, broke the record for most goals scored at a World Cup tournament. I'm not quite sure we're going to see a replication of that this time round.
But it also had quite a few penalty shootouts. The last World Cup. Look,
it did, but it had penalty shootouts off the back of high-scoring games a lot of the time. I'll agree with you that the knockout stages did start to tighten up a little bit, but the group stages in particular were a bit of a goal fest at the last World Cup, if you remember. And again, I don't know that this is going to be true. I'm just saying, statistically speaking, a lot of teams come into the tournament without a recognised goal threat. A lot of teams come into this tournament without an out-and-out proven striker, and a lot of teams come into this tournament, like I said, having underperformed their XG quite badly in qualifying, which could lead to a very goalless tournament.
I mean, look, I'd like to mention two things. One, the whole striker problem is a widespread issue in football. There's not many good strikers in general in the market. And second of all, I mean, it's in the middle of the season, so it brings the question: are people really, like, with the whole controversy and everything, will people really take it seriously like any other World Cup? Will they go out there and give it their all and are willing to die on that pitch? That's a big question as well. Whether everyone will stay fit. Injuries can always mix things up a bit, and it's possible that we can't predict it. More so now than ever, because there's many factors that might change it.
Well, with all that said, I think it's about time we finally got into the thick of it. There will be, because this is going to be another massive video most likely, so there will be timestamps in the description below. And we might even try and do the whole chapters thing, so you can jump in between sections of the video if you're only interested in the one group, or if you just want to, watch the video in segments without having to sit through the entire thing at once. But that does bring us to the first group on the docket, and that would be, logically, Group A, which consists of the host nation Qatar, as well as Ecuador, Senegal, and the Netherlands. Qatar and Ecuador obviously kick off the tournament this Sunday, with Senegal and the Netherlands facing each other a day later. Eva, give me your thoughts on the group and sort of what you think we can expect, and who you're looking at, and what you think the most likely outcome out of this group is.
I think it's pretty clear cut. So Senegal and the Netherlands are the clear favourites, with Ecuador potentially causing an upset there. I expect Qatar to finish last. Ecuador, maybe if Senegal get a little bit shaky, especially with Sadio Mane's injury, who we don't know when he'll come back exactly. Whether it's in time for the second or third game, or if he misses the group stages entirely. So yeah, I expect Ecuador in and around, maybe like squeezing in second place if Senegal really get off to a bad start, and I expect the Netherlands to top the group. Even though they do struggle to score goals, like you mentioned, they don't really have quality finishers, and it is a big problem for them, but I still think there's enough talent there for them to top that group.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It is unusual, to say the least, to have a World Cup where the host nation might objectively be the worst team at the tournament. But that is sort of the situation you've got here. I mean, I don't know anyone who thinks that Qatar can do any better than a bottom place finish. I think if Qatar pick up a point out of this group, a lot of people will say that that's success for them. One thing that I do think will surprise people about Qatar is the style of play that they implement. So I think a lot of people will assume that because Qatar, they are a lowly nation, they've never qualified for a World Cup before this one. They've technically still never really qualified because they didn't qualify properly for this one. They were sort of just given entry into the tournament. But I think one thing that'll surprise me is Qatar do try to play football. So they're not a sort of low block, long ball type of team that perhaps you would expect them to be, given where they rank in the global game. They have got a Spanish head coach leading them, someone who's clearly influenced by the philosophies of, I mean, even Xavi, who coached in Qatar for a long time. You can tell his footprint on the game there has been left in a rather noticeable manner. So they do try and keep the ball on the deck. They do try and actually play some football against people. Unfortunately for them, I think the core issue is that the player quality just isn't there for that to make a difference. I think at some point you can be coached as well as you like, but if you've just not got the players, you've not got the players. And I don't think they have the players, as you pointed out. Ecuador are a young side. They're actually one of the youngest coming into the tournament. Very dynamic, energetic, very tactically flexible, which I like about them. So they're equally adept at dominating the ball with short-range passing, and also sitting back and hitting teams on the counter-attack. They do struggle for goals, which I think is their main issue. They draw a lot of games, so they're not easy to break down, but they don't do a great job of creating chances at the other end. Senegal, I think, are one of the most interesting teams going into this tournament. Obviously, the best African nation in the world right now, given simply by the fact that they're the current champions of Africa. But they have lost Sadio Mane, and I don't think any of us truly know. I mean, he's so important to the way that team plays. So integral to how they set up tactically. And such an important leader in the team as well. I mean, his mere presence brings out... I mean, you heard his own teammates compare him to... He's their Lionel Messi, in their own words. He is to Senegal what Lionel Messi is to Argentina. So not having them for potentially the whole group stage, if not at least the first couple of games, could be quite... I don't want to say devastating, but it's certainly not going to make things easier for them, is it? You'd think they'll still have enough to get past Qatar, and then the big question mark is he available in time for that third game against Ecuador, which will wrap up the group stage. But I do like them. I think they're tactically very interesting. They set up in a very modern sort of 4-3-3 sort of style. They know how to play with the ball. They know how to exploit the wide areas with Ismaila Sarr and Sadio Mane. They're very dangerous in transition as well, with Kalidou Koulibaly looking for balls over the top to Mane. I think they've got a great midfield. I think they've got a very balanced midfield. Defence is obviously very strong with Koulibaly and Mendy as two of their star players. And this is one, if you're looking for dark horses, particularly African dark horses going into the tournament, Senegal wouldn't be a bad shout. Finally, the Netherlands. Funnily enough, even though they're coached by Louis van Gaal, who's as Dutch as they come, they don't play like a typical Dutch team. They don't play a 4-3-3. They set up in a 3 at the back system. They press extremely aggressively, so they regularly have the defensive line at the halfway line, which does lead to them conceding a lot of goals. But fortunately for them, the group they're in, I'm not sure anyone other than maybe Senegal, if Mane was fit, but he isn't. No one's really suited to exploit that, and because of that, I do think, for my prediction, I do believe the Netherlands top the group because stylistically, I see a lot of good matchups for them. I'd be shocked if I would be disappointed, rather, not shocked, disappointed if Senegal didn't finish second at least. I think that they've got an extremely talented group of players that you could argue this is the most successful Senegal team ever, given that they've won their first African Cup of Nations recently. They've got an experienced manager in Aliou Cisse leading them, a guy who's been there for almost a decade. So they've got continuity with the manager, a successful manager, a strong foundation at the back to build from, which is really important in tournament football. I think Ecuador will do all right, and I think Ecuador will certainly be tough to break down, but I don't think they've got the firepower required to overcome the other two. And unfortunately, I think Qatar might end up being in spite of their attempts to play good football, they might be the whipping boys a little bit in all this.
Yeah, I agree. So, Netherlands first, either Senegal or Ecuador second, and Qatar last.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about Senegal being second personally. Anything you'd like to add, or should we move on to Group B? Let's jump straight into it then. So England, Iran, the United States of America, and Wales. I don't know that there's ever been a more politically charged group at a World Cup finals than this one. Give me your thoughts again. So what you sort of looking at? What do you expect from the individual teams?
I think this is a more interesting group than people think, beside the whole political thing. I think England, the US, and Wales are all really good teams. England, coming out of a European final, and the US have a really talented bunch of young players coming through, especially in the attack. Brendan Aronson, Reina, Pulisic, and Wales are obviously very dangerous at the World Cup and at the Euros. So I think it could really it could be a very interesting group to see. Whether or not England bottle it,
Always a possibility with them.
Always a possibility. But I do think they definitely go through, and then whether it's Wales or the United States that go through, I honestly don't know. I think it's a question of whether the United States come to play if they're ready to show up there and not be afraid and go for it. But realistically, I have a little bit more faith in Wales, especially that they usually do, especially at the Euros in 2016. They did really well. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the United States team is still a little too young, and that this won't be the tournament. So it's probably, for me, going to be England topping it, then Wales second, the US third, and Iran last.
It's interesting that you say that about this group being more interesting than people think, because technically speaking, this, in terms of average FIFA World Ranking, and I know people take the piss out of the FIFA World Rankings, largely for good reason, but in terms of average FIFA World Ranking, this is actually the most competitive group at the World Cup. I can't remember exactly what the statistic is, but I believe every single one of these countries is in like the top 25, top 30 in the FIFA World Rankings. So in terms of rankings, average rankings, it's the toughest group in the tournament. I disagree with you on the Wales front. I don't expect much from them at this tournament. You have to keep in mind, this is Wales' first World Cup appearance since 1958. And while I'm not saying tournament tradition is everything, obviously Croatia made it to a World Cup semi-final in their first ever tournament appearance. But I do think tournament experience plays a factor. And I think teams that have done this before will have an edge over those who are carrying a complete lack of sort of pedigree, World Cup pedigree with them. Yes, Wales have done very well in relative to their let's say their on paper names list. They've done very well in recent Euros tournaments, although I do think they were a bit fortunate to get out of their group at Euro 2020. I just don't see in a group with England, Iran, both of whom have a lot of World Cup experience, in the United States, who I just think have got superior players. A Wales team that are effectively a championship side on the international stage, both in terms of literally the fact that most of their players play in the championship and in terms of the style of football that they deploy. I would be rather surprised if they get out of the group. Now, to be fair, I said that exact same thing a year ago. I think I had them pegged to finish bottom of their group, and they ended up going in second. So this could be an instance where the Welsh surprise me again. But I'm going to say they finish bottom. England, I'm fully expecting an English implosion at some point in this tournament. I think the biggest weakness England have is Gareth Southgate, and that weakness will come back to bite them in the arse sooner or later. Not in the group stages, though. I think the draw's been so kind to England, kind enough that any potential deficiencies or flaws will be made up for just on the back of individual quality alone. So in my opinion, it really comes down to a choice of Iran or the US for that second spot. And people forget that Iran have qualified for 3 consecutive World Cups now for the first time in their history. They're being managed by Carlos Queiroz, who's an absolute legend over there, who's done incredibly well with Iran for as long as he's been in charge. He's made them incredibly difficult to break down. They're going to be one of the most well-organised teams at the World Cup this year, defensively. The only thing stopping me from saying they've got a real chance is they've got very little goals in them. They don't offer a lot of threat and attack. And the United States, while I do agree with you that they're still a little bit green around the gills, they're a very young team. In fact, they are the youngest team in terms of average age going into this World Cup. And I agree that their best players, certainly you would hope, have got their best years ahead of them. I think it'll be just enough. The lack of firepower in Iran's squad, I think, will be just enough. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is a close group where second comes down to a point, a missed penalty, maybe even goal difference. I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as people think it will, especially when it comes to Iran. I feel like a lot of people are dismissing Iran out of hand when they shouldn't, because they have become a bit of a regular fixture at the World Cup. So I will differ a little bit in my prediction from yours in that I'll agree that England should top it, really, with the quality they have. But I expect the United States of America to finish second, with Iran in third and Wales capping off. Still a very important and memorable World Cup experience, but capping it in fourth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I still think Wales will do better than you think, but
it's a question of, I feel like the best players they've got have peaked. They've not really got any outstanding youngsters that you look at and go, they're ready to pick up the mantle. And the average squad level, like I said, is pretty championship. And I know that works for them in the Euros, but they rode their luck. Again, I urge people to go back and watch Wales during the last Euros. They rode their luck massively and then got absolutely smashed in the round of 16 by, I believe it was Denmark. So in a World Cup setting where they are up against... to be fair, I wouldn't be surprised if they did all right against England, because it's a rivalry and because they actually do know how England play fairly well. But in a World Cup setting, especially with the pressure that's going to be on them, the emotions of being back after 60 years, I just don't see it personally. I really don't. Would you care to move on to Group 3, or Group C, I should say? We've got Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland.
so I think Argentina are big favourites in this tournament. I think they might win it. They've definitely got the players for it, and I think the squad is very well balanced. So I think they'll be topping this group, and they'll go far in this tournament. And then following them, I think Saudi Arabia will be better than people think. I think they have a chance, and that second spot remains fairly open. I think Poland might disappoint. Just sort of a gut feeling, and I think Mexico. They're always a fun team to watch, and I think they also got a chance at the second spot. So I think Poland might be the surprise exit, and then one of Saudi Arabia or Mexico will go through along with Argentina.
Yeah, to me, this is the most straightforward group, maybe of the whole tournament. I mean, you've got Argentina, who are a shoe-in to top it. Like you pointed out, one of the favourites for the tournament. Virtually no weaknesses in the side. They look absolutely unbeatable at the minute, and I certainly wouldn't be shocked to see them lift the whole thing. Saudi Arabia in a sort of similar situation to Qatar. They do try and play football, to be fair to them. They do try and take people on, but the quality just isn't there on an individual level for that to make a difference in a context like this. Mexico are an interesting one because they are, a World Cup fixture for as long as the World Cup's been around. Famously, they for 5 consecutive World Cups now have exited in the round of 16 stage after making it past the group. I wouldn't be shocked to see a similar sort of thing happen this year, although it is worth noting that they are getting a little bit older. They've stagnated quite a bit as a group, and we're still waiting for that, or we're waiting for the coaches to let that next generation of talent take over. Does that leave the door open for Poland? They are top-heavy, Poland. They've got a surprising amount of firepower up front with the likes of Arkadiusz Milik, Piotr Zielinski, Robert Lewandowski, of course, and even Krzysztof Piatek. So they've got numbers forward. They've also got Matty Cash, who's been a key addition at fullback, and he's been absolutely spamming crosses for them since he joined. In fact, Poland averaged the most crosses of any team in European qualifying. They also scored a lot of goals in European qualifying, to be fair to them. So I think Poland have got half a chance of squeaking through. But again, to me, it's about Jose Mourinho's favourite catchphrase, football heritage. And Mexico getting through the group stages and getting knocked out in the round of 16. To me, that's heritage. So I'm going to make the prediction that it's going to be Argentina, Mexico, Poland, and Saudi Arabia. But keep an eye on the Polish because they might surprise you.
I think they don't have a problem that many teams in the tournament do have, is that they have strikers. They have many options up top, and like you said, with Matty Cash, they've got someone to provide those chances. So you should keep that in mind. And obviously, Poland's a very, very good team. I don't know. It's just a gut feeling that I don't think they'll make it out of this group.
That leads us then to Group D, where we have the reigning champions France paired with Australia, Denmark, and Tunisia. How do you feel about this one?
All right. So this is all about if you believe in the World Cup curse or not.
Well, there's nothing to believe in. I mean, factually speaking, 4 out of the last 5 World Cup holders have been knocked out. So in the group stage, so it is a real quantifiable thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, objectively on paper, France are good enough to get out of this group. I think they might surprise everyone and not finish first. I think Denmark are objectively just a really good team. In terms of how they play, the players they've got are very well balanced, very well going forward, and very well in defense. So I wouldn't be surprised if Denmark tops this group. And then France, if the curse works, then the third. If not, I think they squeeze in second. And then I think it will be a toss-up between Australia and Tunisia. And I think Tunisia will finish third and Australia will finish last.
Yeah, Australia, I think, are in with a shout. I know I said earlier Qatar might be the worst team at the tournament, but I do believe Australia are in with a shout for being the weakest team in the World Cup this year in terms of just pure players in the squad. It's not what you maybe have come to know from previous tournaments. No more Tim Cahill, no more Mile Jedinak, no more pretty much any of them, really. I mean, the fact that their most recognisable player is Championship, or is even Championship, I think he might be in the Scottish League now, Aaron Mooy, is their most recognisable footballing talent, along with Matt Ryan, who's a backup at Arsenal. It doesn't bode well for Australia. I'm with you. I want to call a shock prediction and say France don't make it out of this group, because all the writing's on the wall, isn't it? They've got internal turmoil. They've got several of their best players missing. Paul Pogba hasn't travelled. Nkunku's just left the squad. Kimpembe hasn't travelled. Varane's coming in off the back of an injury. Karim Benzema's coming in off the back of an injury. That's before we get into the whole weird Kylian Mbappe wizard thing that's been going on as well. There's all the ingredients are there for a French implosion, similar to what we saw in 2002. My problem is I think the group they've been handed is so poor, and so, Denmark aside, is so poor. I almost feel like even if they tried, they wouldn't be able to finish lower than second. I agree that Denmark are the team. France are not the team to beat in this group. Denmark are. And if people are still not taking Denmark seriously, then that's on them, because Denmark are proper brilliant. They're an incredibly well-balanced team. They attack well, they defend well, they're very, very well-rounded. Yes, they don't have a lot of flash names, which I think is why people sort of let them fly under the radar a little bit. But they're so well put together. And you know me, I love a well put together team. They're sensibly coached, smartly managed, tactically flexible. They've got two midfielders to watch at this tournament in Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and Christopher Eriksen. You've got some fantastic talent. Did I say Christopher? I meant Christian, excuse me. They've got some very exciting attacking talent in Mikael Damsgaard. There's a lot to really like, and I'm with you. I think Denmark topped this group. They beat France back-to-back in the Nations League, so clearly they've got it in their locker to take down the French. I see no reason for them not to do it again. The question now is, do you believe... Australia ain't going to do it, so let's be clear about that. Australia are not the team that's going to knock France out of the World Cup. Now watch this get clipped up. But it really is a question of, do you believe Tunisia have enough in them to pull off the upset of the century and eliminate France? And I will say this, Tunisia are very, very good defensively. Again, much like Iran, they're incredibly well coached. They are set up to defend like their lives depend on it, mainly because they struggle to score goals. Having seen France in recent years, they do struggle against teams that hit them with a low block. I mean, we saw them get knocked out by Switzerland, who played that sort of style at the Euros. We've seen them struggle against Hungary, who deployed that sort of system. So it's theoretically possible that Tunisia might, be able to keep a clean sheet, nick a goal from a set piece, eke out a 1-0 win. It wouldn't blow my mind, but I'm still not confident enough to say it's a certainty. I'm torn. I'm still thinking about this right now, Here's what I'll say. No matter what, I really do think Denmark will top it, and I think Australia finish bottom. Against my better judgment, I'm going to be an optimist here. Do you believe in vibes? Do you believe in, energies and all that? Rocks, chakra. I'm going to say on gut feeling, as you've called on gut feeling a few times today. On gut feeling alone, I'm going to say Tunisia shock the world and pip France to second place, and the World Cup curse continues as Didier Deschamps is quartered and guillotined in Paris upon returning home.
Mate, I'm all vibes, no stats, and it's never failed me.
Except all the times it's failed you.
Watch it not fail me, okay? They're going to sack Deschamps and they're going to bring in Zidane because they've set that up and they're just waiting for him.
I mean, in fairness, Deschamps has said he's leaving the squad anyway after the World Cup, so I don't think it matters much whether they sack him or not. Let's move on then to Group E. Spain, Costa Rica, Germany and Japan. What do you make of that one then? On paper, this is potentially the toughest group in the tournament. I don't think it is. I actually think this might end up being the most boring group in the tournament, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But what do you feel about it?
Okay, so I'm going to start with Germany simply because I know more about the German team. I think that they have a lot of talent there. I still think it's a little bit early for them to be contenders for the World Cup. You have, Hansi Flick, who's this is going to be his first proper tournament, and I just don't think they're ready yet. I still think there's many problems there, problems Hansi Flick needs to work on. I think that the choice of leaving out Mats Hummels was a questionable one, considering he's probably the most informed German defender right now. and at the time of filming this, Klosterman has injured himself after coming back from a long-term injury. Flick, hopefully against his better judgment, chose to call him up, and of course he got injured 30 minutes in a friendly before the World Cup. So we're waiting to see how that turns what that turns out to be. And yeah, I think there's some promising young players there, like my boy Yusufa Mukoko, who might make a big difference in this tournament. In fact, I think he might be one of the young players to watch. In terms of the other teams, Spain, obviously, under Luis Enrique, a very well-coached side. I think there were also some questionable decisions there, like not bringing Thiago, going for a relatively young midfield. But yeah, I mean, I think they're always strong contenders. I don't think they're as good as they might hope they are, or as they might hope to be. But yeah, I think Japan and Costa Rica. I think Japan are a very good team with some very good players, and they're definitely not to be underestimated. I think personally Costa Rica are probably the weakest team in this group, so I'll say I think Germany make it out of the group. So I think it will be Germany. I think it will be Germany second, and then Costa Rica last, and then I don't know. I think Germany and Spain make it. I think this is one of those groups where the favorites will go through. Although Japan are not to be underestimated, and there is definitely potential for Germany to slip up there. I think they will get out of the group and then get knocked out in the first round. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot to be expected from them, and I think Japan are in with a good chance of getting out of this group.
Yeah, so the reason why I said that this has the potential to be the most boring group at the tournament is because the thing that all four of these teams have in common is that they don't score goals. So Spain have got one of the most exciting midfields at the tournament this year. They are very, very good on the ball. They dominate possession. In fact, they've only had less than 60% possession once in the last 2 years, and that was when they had 59% possession. So they're a very Spanish Spain team, as you would expect, given that they're coached by Luis Enrique. But they don't score goals on a consistent basis. Costa Rica, very good defensively. They keep a lot of clean sheets. They're very similar to the Costa Rica side of 2014 that got to a quarter-final, which that alone makes you think they've always got a chance of squeaking out the group because their defense is so good and they're up against teams that are just so poor at scoring goals. They might be able to, if they can get, again, similar story to Tunisia, if they can squeak out a couple of set-piece goals, that might be enough in a tournament setting. Germany aren't as defensively solid. They do concede goals, but they don't score goals either, which is what I think sets them up to be one of the disappointments of this tournament, and I'll get on to what I expect them to do later. And then Japan is a similar story, very well organised, very solid, very tough to break down, but they just don't score goals. And I think the fact that you've got four teams in a group who all defend well and all struggle to score goals doesn't exactly set this up to be the most exciting group of the tournament, to put it like that. This could be one where the top team, like the team that tops the group, might end up with three or 4 points. This could be one of those where the top team ends up with a win in 2 draws or something like that, and the second place team ends up with 3 draws or something like that, because I'm not seeing where the separation comes from team to team. I will say they do, to not put everyone in the same bracket, they do create chances. So before anyone gets the false idea that these are all defensive-minded, counter-attacking teams, Costa Rica would fall into that bracket. Costa Rica don't score a lot of goals because they don't create a lot of chances. But Spain and Japan create chances fairly regularly. Their problem is not putting them away. Both teams, I believe, underperformed their XG by about 5 goals in qualifying. So the problem isn't what they're doing with the ball in build-up. The problem is that no one's there to put it in the back of the net. Germany are slightly different in that Germany have scored more goals than the other three, although not by much. Their problem, I think, is that they're not scoring enough goals to compensate for what is objectively a rather lackluster backline, particularly in the full-back areas. Once you get out of central defence, they've not got a lot of depth or quality in the full-back areas. Thilo Kehrer actually naturally a centre-back playing for them on the right. David Raum, who is, to be fair, an attacking threat on the left, but he can be exposed sometimes by teams attacking on the counter. So I'm a little bit torn because on paper, Germany are Germany, and surely you think to yourself, well, they're not going to get knocked out in the group stage twice in a row. I mean, Germany are pretty much the model for consistency at World Cups. They've had more World Cup semi-final appearances than any other nation in the world, despite not winning it the most of everyone. So they're not always winning it, but they're always there or thereabouts. And it almost feels counter-instinctive to suggest that for a second consecutive tournament they won't make it out of the group. But that's exactly what I'm going to say, because I think Spain are a better footballing side. I think they're further along in their development, although I still think their best days, similar to other young teams in the tournament, I think their best days are still to come once the likes of Pedri and Gabi and Ferran Torres, Dani Olmo even continue to evolve and hit their prime. I think they're just the best footballing team in all of this. And Japan, I feel like people are going to be very surprised by Japan. They know how to play football, especially in the opposition half. They love to keep possession, circulate the ball, look for intricate passes over the wings. They've got some really decent attacking options in the final third, particularly in the wing areas with players like Takumi Minamino, Takefusa Kubo, Ito, and players like that. And their defensive stability, especially against teams that aren't going to be scoring buckets of goals, should be enough to make them very competitive. So I'm going to go for my second straight shocker, if you will. I'm going to say Costa Rica finished bottom, because although they are difficult to break down, the lack of goals at this point, I think, is just going to be too much to overcome. And the star players of that run in 2014 are all well over 30 by now. So to rely on them to the degree they are currently, I'm not sure is the wisest idea. Costa Rica to finish bottom. I'll have Germany just miss out in third, with Japan pulling off an upset second place finish and Spain topping the group.
That whole comment with defenses, I find interesting, because there comes a moment where, like, if everyone knows they've got a good defense and they need wins, they'll kind of just all go for it, and then they'll kind of throw away the whole defensive aspect and just try and score goals, which is a possibility I see in this group. And another thing I wanted to say in relation to Germany, I think, the fullbacks are probably the weakest position, but I think with someone like Niklas Süle, who can slot in at right back and who has played very well for Dortmund at right back, I think that might be a very convenient solution for them. And then at left back or left wing back, because they'll definitely play with a back three, they'll either go for Raum or what was it, Robin Gosens. I'm not sure if he came around. He didn't. Well, then David Raum was a very good attacking player, and yeah.
But keep in mind, as I mentioned, the issue isn't so much you talk about teams going to attack. The problem isn't that Spain and Japan don't attack. Like I said, both of them dominate possession. Both of these teams average over 50% possession per game. So it's not an unwillingness to take the ball to the opponent. Both of these teams try to score goals. They're just not scoring them. Like I said, both of them underperformed their expected goals by a margin of over 5. So it's not so much an issue of creating chances or getting the ball in the box. It's a question of once they get the ball in the box, they don't really have anyone who can put them away. And I don't think it's a coincidence that both of these teams lack a recognised out-and-out goal scorer. I mean, Spain have got Alvaro Morata, who, let's face it, over the course of his career can hardly be labelled prolific. And it says a lot about their striker situation that they've resorted to deploying the likes of Ferran Torres and Dani Olmo in a false 9 role. So chances I don't think will be the issue. Both of these teams will create chances. The problem will be who puts those chances in the back of the net. And listen, this is tournament football. This is a World Cup. All it takes is one guy, Mario Kempes, 1978 style. All it takes is one guy to hit peak form as the tournament kicks off, and you might have a recipe there. But that's something we can't predict. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to predict the groups. I can only go off the metrics that I currently have. And the metrics that we currently have suggest that these teams struggle in front of goal. All right, we've got to keep moving here. And that brings us to Group F, featuring Belgium, Canada, Morocco, and everyone's favourite, hopefully, World Cup runners-up, Croatia, the reigning runners-up, I should add to that. How are you feeling about this one?
We're winning it all. That's what I think. Yeah,
By we, he obviously means Canada.
Yes, Toronto, go Maple Leaves. I think this is also a very, very interesting group, I think there's a lot of well-balanced teams here that could cause an upset. Obviously, I'm going to back Croatia. I think Croatia have a very good team now, a team that, unlike many other younger teams, should be at its peak now, with this being, for example, Modric's last tournament. I'm expecting us to get out of this group, and as for who will join us, I think Belgium obviously have a good team, but let's face it, lately they haven't been really doing well, and that team might be past its best, especially in terms of the defense. Canada has some promising players. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if they're the ones to get out of the group with us. And Morocco are also a team that could cause an upset. But in the end, I think they just don't have the quality. I think we'll top the group. I'll be positive. And then I think shock. Either Canada or Morocco finishes in second. Then I think Belgium finishes in third, and then whoever out of Canada or Morocco doesn't finish second finishes last.
It's another one I feel like you could, if you wanted to, make a cheeky little outside prediction, because Belgium are the wild card in all this, which feels strange to say because you'd think they'd be the surefire bet. But Belgium are the wild card in all this a little bit. The golden generation is very much past its peak. This does feel like more of a swan song than it does a last hurrah. All the likes of Eden Hazard, Kevin De Bruyne, Jan Vertonghen, Toby Alderweireld, all of them are now over 30 years of age. The young players that have come in, unfortunately, haven't developed, most of them as well as had been hoped. Even some of their current prime players like Romelu Lukaku really struggled. Lukaku in particular has really struggled this season despite returning to Inter. So you almost find yourself in another position where you've got another big nation, in quotation marks, that you could feasibly see get knocked out. I agree with your assessment that Croatia to me are the most sensible pick for who tops this group. I think they're the most balanced of the four teams. I think they're much more well-rounded now than they were 4 years ago. This is an objectively better Croatia team than the one that reached the World Cup final, which doesn't necessarily mean they will have better performances on the pitch. But they're nowhere near as top-heavy as that Croatia team was. The defence has become much stronger with the emergence of the likes of Gvardiol from Leipzig, Borna Sosa from Stuttgart, even the likes of Stanisic from Bayern Munich. So the defence has grown and evolved in a big way over the last few years. The midfield core has stayed the same with Brozovic, Modric and Kovacic is the operating as the midfield three, but they've added to that now with some real depth in the form of Pasalic, Maya, even Luka Sucic from Red Bull Salzburg. And they have got quality in wide areas with the likes of Mislav Orsic and Ivan Perisic. Like a lot of other teams at this tournament, they do struggle with a lack of a recognised goal scorer down the middle. How much that could come back to haunt them, I don't really know yet, because it's such a widespread issue at this tournament. Maybe it'll be a bigger issue than people think, or maybe the lack of strikers across the board will sort of cancel out for everyone. Certainly think it'll be interesting to see how Croatia cope with that tactically. They've come into this tournament really well. If you put stock into pre-tournament form, Croatia are in some of the best form they've ever been. Coming into Qatar, they topped the Nations League group, beating out the likes of Denmark and France, who, as you heard me say earlier, I think Denmark are an absolutely brilliant team, and France obviously are the reigning world champions, so that's nothing to sneeze at. They topped their World Cup group pretty comfortably, the qualifying group, I should say. So a lot of the winds are blowing in the right direction for Croatia. I would be surprised and disappointed if they, to not even exit the group, I think would be an embarrassment of the highest order. But I feel fairly confident in predicting them to finish top of the group. It doesn't even feel like a particularly controversial call to make. Morocco, if it wasn't for all of the drama surrounding their head coach and the exclusion and inclusion and bringing back of Hakim Ziyech and the controversy surrounding that, I'd feel much better about their chances. But to give a new manager 3 games to prepare his team for a World Cup, having not coached them prior to that, I don't think is exactly a recipe for success. So in my book, it comes down to Belgium and Canada for that second spot. And really, it's a question of how badly do Belgium perform. If Belgium can extract even the minimum out of the players at their disposal, you'd think they should have enough to get past the Canadian team that's in its first World Cup in about 40 years. On the other hand, Canada will be motivated. They'll be passionate. They'll have a point to prove. They'll be fired up. They've got a young team. They've got a hungry team. They've got a talented team as well. Let's not forget there are some genuinely good players in that Canada side. It's almost a coin toss. And again, it shouldn't be. You'd think between Belgium and Canada, it's an obvious choice for who goes through. My gut feeling is that the experience of Belgium will be just enough to put them through. I think the quality of Kevin De Bruyne in particular is going to be a huge factor in separating the two sides. So my final prediction that I'm landing on is Croatia to top the group, Belgium just about squeezing into second with Canada. A very respectable third sets them up for their next World Cup on home soil in 2026, and then Morocco finishing bottom. Anything you'd like to add, my dear colleague?
I'm gonna channel my inner LeBron James about that Morocco manager. I knew about that. I forgot. I actually watched it live. But yeah, I forgot that, and I did find it weird that he would do that. So yeah, I think I might go back on my prediction and say Canada actually goes second, Morocco last, and then Belgium third.
I wonder how many people will get that reference. If it's more than two, I'll be pleasantly surprised. Right, so this brings us on to Group G. Can I just say, these last two groups, for me, groups of the tournament, Groups G and H, these are the tastiest, the most unpredictable, the ones where I really look at it and go, I've almost not a clue who's going to advance. Group G, one of the two groups of death, with Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon. There's not a bad team in there, is there? But still, only two can progress. Who do you think it'll be?
Group G, right?
Yes, that's what I just said.
Yeah, no. I'm just looking forward to Group H. So Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, Cameroon. I think Brazil, before they put out their team sheet, I was fairly confident in them. But seeing that they've only brought 4 central defenders, I think that they will be top heavy, especially with what 9 forwards they've got. And some questionable choices in the midfield. Fred. Serbia,
Good old
obviously,
Fred.
I think they're major dark horses in this tournament. I think people are really underestimating Serbia. Pixi Stojkovic is a fantastic manager, and since he's come in, Serbia have looked completely different. They look good at the back, although they don't have many big names in defence. But they've got a fantastic midfield, and they've obviously got Mitrovic, who is a might I say elite striker, especially in this tournament. I think he might be one of the best strikers in this tournament. And again, unlike other teams, they don't have that problem with scoring goals. I think Mitrovic is bucket loads of goals, and with someone like Filip Kostic able to cross it in, I don't think scoring goals will be a problem. I think maybe defending might be a problem for them, especially against like Brazil, who've got 9 fucking forwards and can bring out like fucking 3 different front threes to try out on you. I think that might cause a little problem, but I trust in that they will be well managed enough to counter those problems. So I expect them to finish top of the group, a very dominant display, kind of like Croatia in the 2018 World Cup. I then think Switzerland are obviously also a very good team. I mean, they knocked out France last year. They're always they've always got a chance of going through, and I think Cameroon, although they've got some decent players, I just don't. Again, like with Morocco, I don't think they have the quality to get past this group, especially like with these other teams. I think it will be very, very difficult for them to get something out of this group. Like unlike Australia and Qatar, it's not that they're one of the weakest teams in the tournament. It's just that they've had bad luck and been drawn into a very difficult group. So I think Cameroon last, Serbia first, and then Brazil second, Switzerland third.
Yeah, you make a good point about Brazil being top heavy, but I would like to add that they're top heavy for a reason. I mean, they've brought 9 forwards because they've got 9 incredibly gifted world-class forwards. That really is, if there's one team at this tournament that doesn't have to worry about a lack of goal-scoring options or a lack of goals in general, it's certainly Brazil. Brazil might end up being the most entertaining team at this year's World Cup. I agree that top-heavy nature and that fragility at the back line could come back to haunt them later on in the tournament. But for a group stage, especially against a few other teams who are imperfect, let's say. It should be more than enough to top the group. So Brazil finishing first for me is a fairly safe bet. There's a reason why people have across the board got them as either their first or second favourites for the tournament. Currently, from what I can see, it's between them and Argentina for who people think is most likely to win it this year. I still believe Argentina are a more well-rounded team than Brazil are, but in this group stage, especially against a Serbia team that isn't exactly gifted with Nemanja Vidic in his prime right now in terms of central defenders, I see the sheer volume of goals that this Brazil side is capable of being. It should be enough to overpower anyone else in their group. Serbia are an interesting one because they're coming into this one off the back of their best qualifying campaign ever. They beat Portugal for top spot in their qualifying group, went directly to Qatar, didn't have to do a playoff. They're going through arguably a little bit of a golden generation, certainly in terms of midfield talent and attacking players. They've got some of the best in Europe in the likes of Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, Dusan Vlahovic, Alexander Mitrovic, Filip Kostic, Dusan Tadic. So they're not short on quality players on the ball and in the opposition box. Where I think this Serbia team gets let down a little bit is the back line, which beyond Nikola Milenkovic, who for several years now has been linked with moves to Premier League clubs, there's not really a whole lot of depth or quality in the area of central defence. And I would also worry that because this Serbia have never made it out of the group stage of a World Cup in their history, and at a point, historical trends like that can begin to play on the minds of a group of national team players. So I'll say this, they've not been done any favours by their group. If this was any other group, I would give them a very good chance of progressing, but I think the headwinds are in their favour. If Alexander Mitrovic can get himself fit, the form he's in, when this man plays for Serbia, he is R9-esque, and his numbers are genuinely frightening in a Serbia shirt. Switzerland are not quite what they were a couple of years ago. I still think they've got a very sound formation at the back. Foundation, I meant to say. That should make them difficult to break down, but like a lot of other teams at the tournament, they lack goals. And between Brazil and Serbia, those nations have both got the firepower to eventually overwhelm them. Cameroon are an interesting one because they sort of fall into no man's land. I think they're a better side than Switzerland are, collectively. But I'm not sure they stack up with Brazil and Serbia. They're sort of in this middle range of being good enough to be good, but maybe not quite good enough to get out the group. So Cameroon are the wild card in this group, in my opinion. The ones that if Serbia were to miss out, I find would be the ones most likely to pip them to that second place. Either way, I'll have Brazil down as my number one. I'm gonna go on a show of faith, a show of optimism in Pixi Stojkovic and his Serbia players, and predict that they will become the first Serbia side to get past the group stages of a World Cup by finishing second, with Cameroon in third and Switzerland a potentially disappointing fourth. But although I would like to say, this is an incredibly tough group, so whoever finishes bottom here has really got nothing to be ashamed of, because like I said, there's not a bad team in here. And there's not a bad team in our final group either, Group H, which again is just as good, if not even more competitive than the previous one. You've got Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay and South Korea. Ivan, the quality here, the teams, the trophies. You've got European champions Portugal. You've got the most successful Copa America team in history with Uruguay. You've got arguably the best team in Asia with South Korea. This, not just in terms of the national sides themselves and the history of them, but the players. You've got Cristiano Ronaldo, you've got Luis Suarez, you've got Edinson Cavani, Heung-min Son, a truly exceptional Iñaki Williams, of course, for those who are La Liga fans. And then the plot lines Portugal rematching against Uruguay after Uruguay knocked them out at the previous World Cup. Ghana facing Uruguay after Uruguay ended their semi-final dream over a decade ago in South Africa. The infamous Luis Suarez handball and then followed up missed penalty. Everything about this group makes my mouth water from the fixtures to the plot lines. How do you feel, and do you have any idea who's most likely to get out of this one? Because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 4 pieces of paper in a little cylindrical hat and I'm going to pull them out in 1 to 4 order and just base my rankings off of that.
Again, I'm going to base it purely off vibes. I'm going purely off of vibes here.
I like this because in terms of the group dynamic of this podcast, I'm sort of the analytics stats-backed one. The one who does his research and follows the analytics, and you're very much the read the tea leaves and sense how the stars and moons are aligned tonight kind of football fan.
What was it? 99% chance, 1%. No,
99% faith,
1% chance.
Yeah.
Hala Madrid. So I think with the whole controversy with Cristiano Ronaldo and the fact that Portugal haven't been at their best, they had to go through the what's it called, the qualifying playoffs.
That's exactly what they're called.
To get to the World Cup, I think there'll be a surprise upset, and then I back Otto Addo's Ghana, who did well to get to the World Cup, to get out of the group. I think they'll finish second. I think Uruguay will finish first, and then I think it'll be between Portugal and South Korea. I still think Portugal have the talent to finish third, and then South Korea fourth.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on Uruguay. I think people are sleeping on Uruguay in a big way. People tend to forget it that this is a country that finished third not too long ago in South Africa. They finished third at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. They weren't far removed from a World Cup final appearance, and even at the last World Cup, they reached the quarterfinals. So Uruguay are always competitive, always very tough to play against in a World Cup setting, and they're brilliant. If you've read through their squad, again, what I love more than anything in a national side is balance. I love it when a team has got a little bit of quality in every area. They don't even have to be brilliant at anything, but if you've got enough quality in every area, you're going to be a massive problem, because most of the time, every team at a major tournament has got some weakness, has got some glaringly obvious problem, whether that be the lack of a main striker or problems keeping clean sheets. Uruguay looks so complete. They've got an excellent goalkeeper in Fernando Muslera, who's become a bit of a World Cup icon, similar to Guillermo Ochoa of Mexico. He always turns up for the World Cup. They've got some top defenders in Jose Jimenez. They've got good midfielders in Federico Valverde and I'm blanking on his name. There's another famous Uruguayan midfielder. I wish I could pull it up right now. Never mind. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me as we advance. And then, of course, they've got some great quality up front. They've got 3. We talk about a lack of an out-and-out striker. Uruguay have got 3 to pick from, with Luis Suarez, Edinson Cavani, and Darwin Nunez. So the spine of this team looks very, very promising. Portugal, I would have felt much better about if it wasn't for all the controversy surrounding Cristiano Ronaldo right now. And it wouldn't be, how poetic would it be if Cristiano Ronaldo, the leading light of Portuguese football for damn near 20 years now, if he was ultimately their downfall at this World Cup because of how much of a distraction he's become and how much controversy and drama he stirs up. How ironic would it be if he ends up holding back Portugal instead of propelling them? Because on paper, Portugal, I know people don't tend to associate Portugal with winning the World Cup, but on paper, they've got the players to do it. I mean, we talk about well-rounded squads. Their squad is incredibly well-rounded. They've got great defenders. They've got great midfielders. They've got great forwards. They should be in contention to win the lot. And somehow it doesn't feel like they are, because, again, people are more focused on what Cristiano Ronaldo wants to do and less focused on Portugal. Ghana and South Korea, two teams I love watching at the World Cup. I'll watch the World Cup for teams like Ghana and South Korea, you know. Always super fun, always entertaining, always a wild card and everything. And that this whole group is essentially just a bunch of wild cards stuck together. I'm really, really struggling. The only prediction I feel confident in making is I'll back your statement that Uruguay top it. But for second place, I truly could flip a coin between Portugal, Ghana, South Korea. I'm going to say Portugal finish second, purely for the fact that they've got so much quality that I think that should be enough to get them over the line. But expect Ghana and South Korea to give them a good go. I say South Korea finish third, with Ghana finishing, again, much like in the other group, finishing fourth. But that is in no means a reflection of their quality as a team. They've got some very, very good players in there. Just like South Korea do, by the way, with Kim Min-ya, who's currently tearing it up for Napoli, Heung-min Son, who we've already mentioned. There's not a bad team in this group, and that's the sad thing, isn't it? Because someone has to finish bottom, someone needs to get eliminated, and yet no one here is blatantly bad enough to deserve it. Any follow-up thoughts? Any final words of wisdom you'd like to add about these groups we've got for the tournament?
I think we did a pretty good job of
Well, here's one more thing, because we do need to start wrapping up. We've gone well over schedule here. Let's do it like this. What's one thing you're looking forward to seeing this group stage, and what's one thing you're dreading about this upcoming World Cup? One thing you're excited for, and one thing you're not looking forward to about the tournament, about the group stages, about everything that we've got coming up.
About everything. Wow, that's a broad thing. I think the atmosphere might be one of the things I'm dreading. I don't think it will be a World Cup atmosphere because of the whole controversy and the fact that they're literally paying fans to go and watch matches. I think that's one of the things I'm not looking forward to. And what I'm looking forward to is just pure curiosity. I mean, we've never had a World Cup in the winter, and it's going to be interesting to see, how that affects teams, the morale, the injuries, and everything. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the thing I'm most excited for, as is the case with every World Cup, is I'm just really excited to see the teams. To me, I think the thing I love most about the World Cup is getting to see nations and countries that you wouldn't watch ordinarily battle it out on the biggest stage in the world. You know, teams like Ecuador, Senegal, Ghana, Cameroon, Australia, South Korea, Japan. Teams that you wouldn't ordinarily watch, particularly if you're based in Europe. And just the unpredictability of it all, because regardless of where it's held, the World Cup is always rife with stories, rife with shocks, rife with surprises, and I fully expect this to be the same thing. I think you nailed it on the negatives, and the atmosphere I think is going to be a big one, and just the general execution of the tournament. We're already hearing the tournament hasn't even started, and we're hearing talks of journalists having their cameras confiscated and footage deleted and pictures erased and people being arrested, and you're thinking, if this is what it's like before the tournament's kicked off, what are we going to be in for once everybody actually gets there? So everything about this whole station, and again, I don't want to get away from it even as we are wrapping up, but truly how horrific it is that this tournament is being held in Qatar, and how stupid just painfully stupid this whole thing has been. But it's been a dark time for humanity recently, and the World Cup's one of the few things that seems to be able to bring universal joy to everyone around the world. So, whilst being conscious of it all, I hope everyone can sort of rally together and try and enjoy the fun of it all as best as they possibly can. Nothing to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just holding out to the beginning of the World Cup, and then I think the whole journalist thing and everything will kind of go out of the media headlines because everyone will be focused on the World Cup, and yeah, it's a shame, but on the other hand, it's expected. I mean, it is the biggest tournament in the world, so all eyes will be on that, and people won't be really paying attention to the other shit that's going on over there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Right, thank you all so much for joining us for another edition of the Stoppage Time podcast. We were hoping to get this one under an hour, but unfortunately we couldn't quite manage it. Hopefully you'll still enjoy it anyway. Like I said, timestamps for the different sections will be in the comments below, so you certainly don't have to listen to all of it at once, although feel free to do so if you like. And our hope and our expectation is that you won't have to wait another year to see us or hear us back again. Optimistically, we'll be back as early as next week to reflect on the first round of games. If not, we'll be back in 2 weeks at the latest to talk about the group stages and how those played out. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment about whatever you like, about how you're feeling about the tournament, how you feel about the podcast, how you feel about my voice, if I'm a shit cunt. Comment whatever you feel like, and feel free to join us again for the next one. I'm Declan Price.
And I'm Ivan, kind of like Pele. It's one name.
It's one word. And we will see you all in the next one. Laters.